cars and planes, or no drinking insane. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdale, MEDMA. We are Duncanville High School in these United States, and today is February 9th, 2021. And on this date in history, in 1953, Joseph McCarthy came forward with a list of 205 communists that worked in the State Department. The State Department, which is under the Secretary of State and is responsible for our relationships with other nations, that it has now been taken over by communists. What a terrifying thing. Later on, we find out that he kind of made up that he had actually 205 people and just kind of made it up and picked some kind of obvious targets to begin with, and everything went down from there. So, farmers never really get a chance to make a lot of money. And after World War I, it really takes away the golden age of farming where people made a lot of money for about 1 year. We provided a lot of food for our allies, so there's a little bit of a return for the farmers, but the truth is after that, you see a big fall to the amount of food that's exported, and even what's sold inside the United States really starts to get small fast. Okay, so they lose massive markets. The fact that efficiency in farming had gone up so much, you had a lot more food than you ever had before, but it lowers the price of crops so much that farmers can't afford to stay in business. Banks started to repossess farm, and this is really the first group of people that really hit the Depression. Okay, and by the time the Great Depression's in full swing, things get even worse. So, if you're looking for something positive to hear, I'm positive that it makes me sad. Kind of a bad attitude, but what are you going to do? So the consumer economy, many people in the 1920s lived above their means. You could buy things on credit that you couldn't normally afford and pay it off and then receive it, or you could get the installment plan and pay it off once you received it. So you had great innovations like up in the top left-hand side. That is a washing machine. That is a Whirlpool. Those were available for a long time, and actually I own 2 of those made from pretty close to that time period. I use them in the belt company. Okay, in the top middle, that is an oven. So you have several different areas where you can heat and cook food. Actually, that's pretty cool. I wish I had that many burners and places to cook things. On the top right, that is a drill. That was another great innovation of that time period, instead of having to do one by hand. At the second row, the first one there, that is a toaster, so a way of heating your bread and toasting your bread. In the very middle there, you have the waffle maker. On the far right, you have the refrigerator. Okay. In the very beginning, though, they would use large blocks of ice, and that would keep things cool inside. The bottom left, that's an iron. Hopefully you know what that is. If not, that's an iron. It's for taking the wrinkles out of your clothes. That's an early telephone right there. That's actually a rotary dial telephone. My mom actually had the one where you would turn the crank on the side, and that would get the operator, and then you would tell them who you were trying to contact. On the far right on the bottom is the dental table to do work on ripping out people's teeth or doing other tooth-related business. A fundamentalist. Okay, fundamentalists. These are Christians that were trying to save the U.S. with religion. Now, a lot of these believed in creationism, that God created the world as described in the Bible. Now, there was a clash between creationists and evolutionists in the 1920s. It culminated in Tennessee with the Butler Act that made it illegal to teach evolution or anything that was against creationism. Okay? So if you had anything that didn't say that God created the universe as described in the Bible, it was heresy and therefore something you could not teach in school. So this leads to the Scopes trial. Okay, so in 1925, John T. Scopes teaches teaches evolution, and he is arrested and executed. Now, if you're paying attention, you might have gone, what did Mr. Dugdale say? I'm just kidding. He wasn't executed, but he was arrested and put on trial. Okay? But the case was later overturned. So this is going to go to court, and you're going to have two of the major hitters in court to try this. Okay? So for defense, he had one of the best defense attorneys in the nation, and that was Clarence Darrow. On the other side, you had William Jennings Bryan. Now, during the trial, Darrow puts William Jennings Bryan on the stand to defend and represent Christianity, and William Jennings Bryan does. Now, William Jennings Bryan will win the case, and for him, this is the same man who ran for president time and time and again. So he sees a big victory, and then he dies. Dies just days after the trial is over. Wasn't even a week. Anyway. As a result of this trial, though, many fundamentalists are going to get out of the political sphere. Now, the 18th Amendment. This is a prohibition on or the ban on alcohol. You know, a complete removal of alcohol from society. No transportation, no consumption, no sale, no manufacture. A lot of people just ignored it, and they would go to these secret bars called speakeasies. There was one of these in the town where my mom was from in Princeton, Indiana. You went into a restaurant, and downstairs there was a secret storeroom, and if you went in, it looked like a library. And they still had what was set up the speakeasy from the 1920s. And they had several false rows of books, and so basically you would go down there and drink, and if there was a raid, as they were opening the door, you would take and put your drink behind the books, and whenever they went through and they started to look for the alcohol, they wouldn't find it. They'd just find a bunch of people down there yelling about some subject or another, smelling of alcohol. Now, the Volstead Act is going to make the Treasury Department enforce prohibition. So the Treasury Department, which is focusing on everything except for running the Treasury, is doing this. And what's really weird, and not surprising in any way, is within 10 years of them, taking care of prohibition, we have the Great Depression begin. So could this be part of it? Maybe. On the right-hand side, you have Eliot Ness, who was a very famous enforcer of prohibition. So many people were sneaking alcohol through different areas, and these were people that were known as bootleggers or even rum runners. And they would hide it in their cars, they would hide it in different places, and sneak it to other areas where they could sell it and make more money off of it. Now, the big problem with all of this is with their limited supply and high demand, the criminal element would come in and make a lot of money off of this. By the way, with the 18th Amendment, let's go back. The 13th Amendment is the ban on slavery. The 14th Amendment is citizenship or civil rights. The 15th Amendment is all men can vote. The 16th Amendment is income tax. The 17th Amendment is direct election of senators. The 18th Amendment is prohibition or the ban on alcohol. And the 19th Amendment is women can vote. So crime was a major business of the time period. Okay, so state governments had police powers at this point, the power to control people in the public's interest. Al Capone on the left-hand side, also known as Scarface, you can see a big scar on his left cheek that starts right at the top of his ear and comes down just to the left of his lip. You just have to since he's facing you, it's on the right side if you're looking at it. Anyway, he was made very rich and famous, and he had several people killed. You have the famous St. Valentine's Day massacre that happens probably under his order, where 8 people are gunned down on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. What? Yeah, anyway. So, after 15 years of prohibition being in place, the 21st Amendment ended or repealed prohibition. You know the word repealed, which means to cancel. Okay? So, from this point on, alcohol was legal again. Okay? A few things that might help you remember some of them. 13, you should just remember ban on slavery. But the 16th Amendment, income tax. At 16, you can get a job, so then you have to pay income tax. At 18, you're not allowed to drink, which is prohibition. And at 21, you can drink. So hopefully this has helped cut down some of the amendments you're having a hard time with. So 13 is the ban on slavery. 14 is citizenship or civil rights. The 15th Amendment is the right to vote for men. The 16th Amendment, remember you can work at 16, so you have to pay income tax. 17, you have the direct election of senators. I've got no way to help you with that. 18, you can't drink, so prohibition. 19, women can vote. And 21, you can drink. So 18, you can't. 21, you can. So I could have easily started this one last time. Calvin Coolidge becomes president in 1923 when Warren G. Harding's heart violently explodes and he dies. Now there's a little bit of controversy over how he dies. Some people think that possibly his wife had poisoned him. Okay, because during that year it was revealed that he had had an affair and had an illegitimate child with this woman. Okay. So whenever he dies, regardless, Calvin Coolidge takes over, who might be the least interesting president in history to sit down and have a meal with. About the only thing interesting you might ask him about is why he rode a robotic bronco horse at night before or after he ate. Okay? I can't remember if it was before or after, but the fact is he would ride that thing every day. And he did that to stay in shape. And, I guess it worked. He was reelected on the slogan, "Keep it cool with Coolidge," which is really the slogan that he used. Things were going really well with the economy, and he didn't believe the government should be involved in the economy. And that's one of the things that will ultimately lead to the Great Depression. Robert La Follette, on the other hand, he was running for the Progressive Party. He was still pushing to have the U.S. own railroads, and he was also in favor of limiting the power of the Supreme Court. So, Secretary of Commerce, Herbert Hoover, he attempted to balance the government regulation with cooperative individualism. This is whenever companies would just share information with each other just for the good of the economy. As a businessman, this is how one of the things that Hoover did that helped earn him millions of dollars was just working with other people. He was not the cutthroat industrialist that many of the wealthy were. And so while this did work for him, this system was not there for people that were just asked to do the right thing. Not everyone's willing to do the right thing. Sorry, kind of a sad story. Henry Ford. Now, number one, and first and foremost, he did not invent the automobile. Anyone who tries to perpetuate that myth is really far off and wrong. So Henry Ford creates the assembly line. And the assembly line is going to divide operations into simple tasks for unskilled workers. Okay, where it might take an engineer, who knows what they're doing, an hour or two to do, 10 to 20 steps, they would cut it down so they had two, people that might be intelligent or might be idiots. But because they're doing that thing over and over and over again, they can figure it out in a short period of time. And instead of it taking several hours to produce, it just takes seconds or minutes to do. Okay? And so you get a bunch of people like this on the same line, and they could go through and turn out a car in no time at all. The Model T, the whole idea was to make money by selling a lot of units to a lot of people instead of a few units to, a handful of people at really high prices. The Model T sold for $850 in the first year, but it drops down as low as $99 in 1924 whenever it's mass produced. Ford increased workers' wages. Some of them were paid $5 to $10 a week, and as a result, there were a lot more people that were able to afford the automobile. He also reduced the workday to cut out unions. He used something called welfare capitalism, which is giving benefits and profit sharing to keep out unions. The idea is this. Imagine if you worked for a place and they told you that if you sold 10,000 units this year, everyone gets a $1,000 bonus. And so you're trying to produce good products. You're trying to make sure that none of them are of low quality. If you see anyone on the street, you talk to them about buying your product, and you do things to help grow your company. And that's a lot better than just putting people in a menial job where they're making minimum income. Garages and gas stations open, and they're going to create 6 million jobs. Now, 1 million people are going to die in car accidents by 1951 as a result of all these vehicles. And, the truth is, by 1951, more people died in car accidents than in all the wars the U.S. fought. Charles Lindbergh. Okay, he flies the first solo nonstop transatlantic flight. He uses the Spirit of St. Louis, and he flies all the way from New York to Paris. This was such a great moment in world history because they've been trying to do this for such a long time and no one had been able to get it done. So people in Europe start to see Americans as this really daring group, that would be willing to do anything that could change the world. This is the view that they have of Americans is, Charles Lindbergh. He becomes a worldwide celebrity. He has thousands and thousands of dollars coming in. He actually builds one of the biggest houses in the state where he lives. He and his wife infamously were a celebrity couple, and they have their first child. One day they put the baby down for a nap. They let the baby sleep, then go back to check on him. Whenever they get up there, the baby's gone. There's a ransom note. Someone's kidnapped the child. As they go to the window, the person left the ladder there, and they escaped on foot. They spend the next 16 months trying to find their baby. At one point, there's an attempt at a ransom drop, and when they get there, no one shows up to pick up the money. Al Capone, who was in jail at the time, said that if they got him out, that he guaranteed the safe return of the baby. Now, after about 14 months, someone comes over to spend some time with the Lindberghs, and as they're driving around their property, they see something in the leaves. So they go over to check on it, and they find the skeletal remains of a baby. It turns out that this was the child of the Lindberghs. The baby had been dead on their property all this time, and the man who was trying to kidnap them, he was able to, he dropped the baby and killed it. So this is one of the first real high-profile cases of the FBI, and they're able to look at the ladder and take it to a specialist who can tell which sawmill it came from and how old the wood was. They were able to track that to a home nearby, where they went up into the attic and found the boards, where the boards had been cut out of the roof of the house, or in the attic of the house. So they did kind of find justice for the baby. They went on to have a lot more children, but still, this is a horrific event. But the first real high-profile case of the FBI. Okay, so advertising convinces people that they needed new products. Okay, this is something that was born out of propaganda from World War I, and it works to convince people to to support a nation or to fight, and for the love of all that is holy. It could also help sell products. Okay, Otto Rohwedder creates a bread slicer, and when advertised, it was called the greatest invention of all time, and many other inventions would kind of follow that over the next almost 100 years. And so if you've ever heard this is the greatest invention since sliced bread, this is a reference back to the bread slicer, which was called the greatest invention. This made advertising famous. Now, if you remember, Germany had this massive debt. And as a result of this massive debt, they needed a way to pay it back. So Charles Dawes is going to negotiate with Britain, France, and Germany, and he's going to put out the Dawes Plan. So in the Dawes Plan, the U.S. would loan Germany money for reparations, and France and Britain would agree to accept less money from Germany and pay more of their war debts. A large amount of this is paid back to the United States until 1912. He was not a looker. He did not have a nice haircut, but this was probably a pretty good idea for a plan at the time. So the Washington Conference. This is held in 1921, and this is trying to slow down the naval arms race. The truth was, one of the things that led to World War I was a large increase in shipbuilding to build more war vessels. So Secretary Hughes, who was the Secretary of State, he called for a 10-year moratorium or pause on building major new warships. Now, this doesn't do anything to limit the size of armies or anything else, just the size of the Navy. Now, Japan was upset because their Navy was only about 60% the size of the United States and Britain, and as a result, they're angry and they will be heard afterwards. So the Kellogg-Briand Pact, okay? This is a treaty that outlawed wars and forced countries to settle disputes peacefully. It's also one of the dumbest things on earth because if someone breaks that pact and actually invades another country, you stop them using military force, which essentially you're using war to stop war. But 62 nations ratified it and proclaimed it a great victory because world peace had been achieved. It's good for 11 years and 4 days. Officially, anyway. You might even be able to kick that back a few days from there, but 11 years and 4 days. Fantastic. So the election of 1928. Calvin Coolidge was going to run for president for what would have been the longest presidency to date. But early in 1928, his son was playing tennis at the tennis courts at the White House, which they no longer have. And upon playing tennis, he developed a blister on his hand. Now, here's the deal. They didn't have anything for antibacterial, no Neosporin. Neosporin could have saved his life. He went to all the best doctors in the world, but his blister got infected and he died. As a result, Coolidge could no longer really run for president, and he decides to step down, and Herbert Hoover, who should have been one of the greatest presidents of all time, steps in. Now, chaos will ensue in his presidency, and he'll be remembered at the bottom, but he should have been great. He was able to work with both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. He worked for the Democrats as the director of the Food Administration during World War I and the Secretary of Commerce under Harding and Coolidge, the Republican Party. There were major problems with prohibition and major religious differences that helped him win. But he took credit for how well the economy was going, and he easily won. Alfred Smith, on the other hand, ran for the Democratic Party, and he was an alcoholic during a time of Prohibition and the first Catholic that was nominated for president from a major political party. He lost mainly because he was Catholic. In the history of the United States, we've had 3 Catholics run for president. Alfred Smith, who lost, John F. Kennedy, who won, and now Joe Biden, who's won. So, anyway, not a lot of Catholic presidents. But I digress. This brings us to the end of yet another day. I hope everyone's having a great day. Please don't cocaine. Please don't AIDS. And don't COVID. If you see someone COVIDing, tell them to stop. Friends don't let friends COVID. Be that friend that tells them, stop being an idiot and don't COVID. It's Mr. Dugdale, and I'll see you soon.